Yeah.
Also, nice to meet you, by the way.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for coming, Counterpoints. I appreciate it.
No, I love yelling about politics on the internet. So my favorite way to spend my time.
Yeah, we're gonna be hosting open panels in here a lot. I'm gonna be working with like Chud Logic, Grant for Liberty, and stuff like that more. I would like to do some work with you, Counterpoints, maybe in the future, for some open panels. I think that'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, always down for more and better work and.
Yeah. Brant wanted to do something between. He wanted to see if I could reach out to you for it, but like Brant for Liberty had some ideas I thought were pretty cool. So maybe we can work out something all together.
Yeah, and then there's my there's both my streams, my Twitch and my YouTube, so that should be good. And then if you don't mind, I am going to shoot digital people in the face while we do this. But I promise, if you ever feel like, hey, you didn't deal with my point, then just point that out, and I'll be happy to address it.
All right, is everyone ready to get this kicked off?
Yeah, let me do one more thing. Give me 20 seconds.
Yep.
Am I doing like a full intro thing or?
Yeah. So I'll do like the intro for like what this is exactly, and then I'll say my piece, and then you'll know where to pick up.
Are you staying in the call?
No.
Okay.
All right, and then I'm down when you are, but on my stream there's gonna be a little bit of audio because I have to go into my settings and shut it off.
Okay. So all right. So you ready to go, Counterpoints?
Yes, I am.
All right, Dylan, you ready to go?
Yep. Whenever you guys.
Alrighty. I want to thank you both for coming. This is the first ever one-on-one in the political shit show. We are a new and upcoming server in Twitch politics and everything. I want to welcome Counterpoints and Dylan Blay. It's going to be capitalism versus socialism. I want to see you two titans really go at it. Rinyald is our moderator of the show, and I will now take my leave, and I wish you two the best of luck.
Okay, well, I'm Rinyald. I'm going to be your moderator. What that means is I'm going to make sure that you don't like talk over each other and clear up any roadblocks if there are any. If you feel like I'm doing poorly as a moderator, please defer to me, yell at me, I can take it. We'll be running for like 1 or 2 hours, capitalism versus socialism, like Alexa said. I'll let Counterpoint start off with an introduction to himself and then throw it to Dylan and then do openings in the same order and then, open discussion.
Yeah, my name is Connor. I identify as center right. I'm a law enforcement veteran and a Marine Corps veteran. I love debating politics, which is why I'm here. And then oftentimes I feel like socialism versus capitalism is the primary subject that we kind of get into on Twitch politics without really getting into it. So I'm actually kind of excited to kind of poke at some core fundamentals of belief because I think it's important to the future of the United States. So super excited to be here and super excited to do it. Let's do it.
Dylan?
Yeah, so I'm Dylan. I'm center left socially, far left economically. I advocate for mostly socialist policies of varying types. You can find me on YouTube at Dylan Blay, where I upload my own content, music, things like that. And you can find me on Spotify, also where I upload my music. That'll be all for that.
All right, sweet. Well, then, do you want to start off with opening statements, Connor?
Yeah, so for me, socialism is defined as the decommodification of basic human needs and workers owning the means of production. Workers owning the means of production, I'm okay with. Decommodification of basic human needs, I think, is an inevitability once we have like automation and fusion power. But right now, I don't think socialist policies I just don't think they make sense in the modern era. I think that there's a lot of modern thinkers that basically think like, first you form your habits and then your habits form you. I don't see how trying to implement like socialist utopias right now are a good idea. And I think if you look at the historical record of the 20th century, there's plenty of things where it went wrong. So while I think that I could potentially agree with like principles of should people not be starving? Should they have access to high quality goods? Should they be able to do this? Should they be able to do that? I can agree with all of that kind of stuff. The question is like, what does the history of the 20th century tell us? And how do we actually implement these ideas in a way that's sensible instead of leading to like mass slaughter, bloodshed, and political intrigue, kind of the way that the history of the 20th century has gone. So that's really like where I'm going to be. Not like, intentionally or whatever, but I'm probably going to drag it back there a little bit, where it's not just going to be highfalutin ideals. It's also going to be how do we implement these highfalutin ideals? So yeah, that's pretty much it. I'll leave it there.
All right, Dylan.
All right, yeah. So basically, my take on this is there are certain policy prescriptions we can make in an effort to transition into a social democracy type of position that will prepare the modern context of America to get ready for a socialist end goal and prepare for a transition into a more socialist-oriented economy. There are certain policy prescriptions I'd like to talk about that I think would be a great way to start sort of this debate off. And I mostly want to talk policy with Connor. I felt like that would be the general direction we were going in, as well as some of the arguments for, the efficacy of certain socialist policies.
All right, well then I'll open up to, an open discussion. Be nice to each other. Go ahead.
All right, well, Dylan, why don't you kind of lead the way with what you think we could do in the modern era, and then maybe I could needle that a little bit.
Yeah, so there's a lot of great policy options that we can implement to help socialize the economy. One of the ones that I think is a fantastic idea is preferential loans for worker cooperatives. There's a lot of data that backs up sort of the worker cooperative talking point. I'm sure you've heard this one before, right? So generally speaking, I'm going to have to go that route. For initial policy prescriptions we can also talk about things like sovereign wealth funds. The one they have in Norway is great in terms of how the state manages their assets and how they get redistributed to the people who work there. General welfare policies are good. Things of that nature, very helpful to the working class. Yeah, I just want to say, are you sort of someone who, like, what kind of prescriptions do you make about capitalism? Are you generally in favor of things like sort of the liberal standard of where we're at in America right now, or?
Yeah, so really the only thing that I have beef with is kind of like, workers being able to get by. So when it comes to like the cost of getting by, when it comes to basically like healthcare, all that kind of stuff, I think there's certain social institutions that the government could prop up either financially, but while not necessarily being in control of, that could help the the worker basically get into a good position. And that's really what I would want to do, particularly like healthcare and education are things that I think are pretty cool and pretty easy to make arguments for these things pay dividends. But ultimately, like, I would want things to be more geared towards productivity, which is why I tend to land on the mixed economy capitalist model rather than like the social democrat or socialist model. And then also on top of that, like if you're talking about like incrementalism, we might end up agreeing a lot because so for instance, like if you're like, oh, hey, people have a tough time securing mortgages in the modern day, despite there being a very sincere need for housing. I don't care if the government helps support that. I'm a beneficiary of the Montgomery GI Bill, despite basically not having a $50,000 down payment and not having phenomenal credit. I was still able to secure housing loans. That's awesome. I think everybody should have access to that, regardless of whether or not they risk their lives overseas. When it comes to healthcare, we pay 22%. I want to say 22% of GDP towards healthcare, whereas I want to say like most nations with a single payer or a multi-payer system with a public option, they pay like 17%. There's a lot of details that go into these things, but like it makes sense to me that a single payer or a public option makes sense. But where I get really uncomfortable, like deeply uncomfortable with socialists in particular, is their willingness to kind of just like centralize government without any real question, their desire to nationalize a lot of things, and then also like where does this end and at what point does the economy collapse? And then finally, just my other needle point is who's done this well so far, and are you claiming them as socialist? Because that's what's really weird is conservatives play this game where if it suits their narrative, then Norwegian countries are capitalist, and then if it suits their narrative, they're evil stinking fucking communists. So it kind of depends on that kind of situation. So I get frustrated when that argument is made in reverse from the lefty side too. So
Yeah, so I figured I'd just get in here pretty quickly and just acknowledge the fact that you're generally it's pretty standard policy prescriptions about most Western countries that are generally active today in terms of things like healthcare, education, certain investments like that. Like personally, I'm from Canada, so we have single payer healthcare option here, right?
fucking commie. Sorry.
No, it's a dirty socialist. Am I right? But yeah, I just wanted to talk about these sort of like policies that I think would help transition us into a socialist country, right? And I would like to try and get you to agree with me on some of these, like preferential loans to worker cooperatives, which I think is a great idea. Because generally speaking, we see a hard time with financial institutions loaning to worker cooperatives because they're seen as a riskier investment. But there's an overwhelming amount of data that backs up the efficacy and benefits of worker cooperatives, which is why I advocate for this in a transitory stage. I don't think that America is going to have some kind of crazy violent revolution. I think that's ridiculous. When you look at sort of the concentration of power in the state of America, it's obviously one of the strongest and most invested in military powers in the world. I don't think there's like any reason to assume that the people of America are just going to break out into some kind of civil war and basically, do anything crazy. So I just want to see what your issue is with this kind of policy, like a preferential loan for a worker cooperative or something like that.
Yeah. So if you want me to address that one specifically, I don't have a problem with it. And the reason why I don't have a problem with it is because basically I already worked for one of the best worker-owned businesses in the United States. It's a grocery chain. It's called Publix. It's in the Southeast. It's actually privately owned, but all of the stock is owned by the employees. After 3 years, you get shares. And as a result, there's a bunch of, basically workers with physical and mental disabilities who are literally cashiers or stock boys and gals and MPALs for decades, and they retire as near millionaires because they basically own private stock in the company. So I'm perfectly okay with workers owning the means of production. I'm also perfectly okay with there being more competitive loans for worker-owned cooperatives. I don't think that in and of itself that's like anti-capitalist. So I'm perfectly okay with that. And I don't. The question is like preferential, like how strict is preferential? Or like are small business loans getting like a 6% interest rate, and then cooperatives are getting like a 0% interest rate? Like what's the dollar amount that you have? You know what I'm saying?
I think just generally we can start with a lowering of the percentage of interest rates on, like, depending on where you are at the interest rates are going to vary, right? And sure. I think that government should match that to meet demand for worker cooperatives in regions where there's not readily available institutes for people to work at that are, owned by workers.
Yeah, sure. And yeah. You're not gonna get a lot of pushback from me on this one. So
okay, so that's a good thing. Another thing I feel like I could address is like I don't understand why you would find that not really a socialist policy.
The reason why it's
anti-capitalist, right?
Why is it anti-capitalist?
Yeah, because it's the lack of concentrating capital ownership into the hands of a private capital owner, whereas generally what a lot of socialists seek is workers owning the products of their labor, right? So when you work for a worker cooperative where you own such a share amount, you are entitled to the sort of piece of the pie you make. You're entitled to the fruits of your labor.
Yeah, but I'm unaware of any like specific capitalist prohibition against like worker-owned cooperatives. I'm unaware of anything really saying that like workers can't be private stock owners in their own businesses and therefore own the means of production. The reason why you might find me like a little bit hesitant or not really fully agreeing with your definition is because socialism is the workers owning the means of production and the decommodification of basic human need. At least that's how I've heard it defined repeatedly, and that's a definition that I work with all the time because basically a lot of, while I'm not accusing you of being you should get on Twitter and slowly hate your life until you decide to log off and go smoke weed or drink booze because you're so emotionally frustrated. I would see a lot of the things that you're talking about as like half solutions. I think you would get in loads of shit for representing this as some kind of like pure strain of socialism. Just because workers own the means of production doesn't mean that, like, at least to a lot of people, that's not like socialism complete. We have a market economy with workers in cooperatives. I don't think a lot of people would buy that in the leftosphere.
I mean, a lot of people do buy that in the leftosphere. You see, like, guys like Vosh come out here, and people tend to agree with market socialism being like a transitory stage of socialism that is in and of itself socialist, unlike social democracy, where there's still the privatized means of production thing, right?
Yeah, but like this is like a 500-year plan, not like 1,000 or not like a decade-long plan, right? Like, when you agree with that?
Yeah, but plans for the long terms are the ones that I only see being the most viable for a first world country like America, Canada, any of the European countries that we talked about, like the Nordic countries.
Well, and I'm not,
those are the ones that are really going to rely on this, right?
Yeah, and I'm not trying to invoke like, just like the worst parts of Twitter or whatever in order to get like optical owns, but like that's really what I see is, Vosh as an example. We'll say, hey, the market's good for some things, and on top of that, I'm pragmatic about my stuff. As a result, we need to do this, that, the other. And as a result, we're riding with Biden and spreading public consciousness about the concepts of socialism, workers owning the means of production, and the decommodification of basic human needs. So really, this is a culture war that I'm hoping to win over the next 300 to 500 years. But then what you also have is you have some pretty aggressive rhetoric about law enforcement. You have some pretty aggressive rhetoric about revolutionary standards and all that kind of stuff. And I understand that you personally might not be bought into that. But basically what would happen is, let's say that, we just advocated for Publix, where every business is privately owned, but the workers have the ability to buy into stock. That is currently permitted under capitalism. You just have to make it competitive. Maybe, kind of like you said, incentivized loans would make it more competitive, and that's good from your end, but I don't really give a shit, because as long as workers are getting a good shake, they're putting in a fair amount of labor, I don't really give a shit. It's the same thing with, what would I say, like unions and shit. Like, a lot of capitalists are like anti-union. I'm not anti-union, because basically what I would see is that's collective bargaining of the workers in order to negotiate fair wages and standards in their workplace. But where it goes too far for me, number one is basically when unions start, doing criminal activity in order to achieve their goals. I think that's, number one, where fuck that. And then number two is actually where the decommodification of basic human needs really steps in, which I don't think we've addressed at all. So the decommodification of basic human need, are there any specific policies that you think should be implemented now, or do you think that's more of like a material conditions thing that has to be addressed over time?
I mean, that one can be addressed over time, but we see the commodification of basic human needs, being implemented slowly every day. It sounds like you agree with me mostly on these policy prescriptions I'm making. Like, again, you stated explicitly that there's nothing wrong inherently about healthcare being provided to people. It seems to do positive things for people, as well as general welfare policy, things of that nature. Like, this is a gradual process of decommodification of human needs. I don't know. I sort of came into this thinking that you were going to be more of like somewhere along the lines of very status quo, kind of like. But it seems like you agree with a lot of these policy prescriptions I'm making, right? I'm not sure where the huge disconnect here is on policy prescriptions.
Well, because
agree with the principle.
Yeah,
I don't see us having much of an issue.
Well, okay, so I'll tell you where it jumps the shark for me. So basically for me, like, the Nordic countries is pretty much where we stop. We identify a few like key social institutions that are necessary in order for society to function. We basically it's not harmonize. It's a different term. We optimize. We optimize how human beings self-actualize and become their best selves. That's something that basically needs to happen. But then after that, we're done, and that's kind of where I'm at. And the reason why is because if you want to start poking into decommodification of basic human needs, that's really like my primary beef with socialism, is because like I think that there will be a time where we automate and we have such unlimited power that it's just going to be like these things are borderline going to be free anyway. So at that point, it just makes sense to give everybody everything because it just makes fucking sense from a material condition standpoint. But at the same time, that's going to be my problem is up until we reach that point, I think number one, we're reliant on a productive society, meaning most people have to wake up, they have to work in order for society to function. Number two, we haven't tested out all the ideas in MMT, so we don't know for a fact that we can print money and just have like corresponding economic product and then the economy won't tank. We don't know that. And then it seems like a lot of these ideas are going to cost a shitload of money. So if the Nordic model works in principle, but it's still a mixed economy capitalist model, then I'm perfectly fine with like landing there as long as we like safeguard constitutional civil liberties and civil rights and the right to own firearms and checks against the federal government. I'm perfectly fine with landing there, but basically that's where my line stops. And so if you were saying like, hey, we have a long march and you're willing to take the first 10 steps with me, then yeah, sure. But there's like 1,000-mile march that you want to complete that I'm not down for.
See, the thing with that 10-step march, you start it like that. Even most of the major socialist thinkers would probably agree with me. Lenin advocated for socialism as a transitory state. Robert Owen, the man who quite literally coined the term socialism, he was also someone who advocated for huge cooperative businesses and things of that nature. So like a lot of these major socialist thinkers agree with me on this stuff, and I don't think there's generally a reason that we have right now to progress any further than that initially, because we have a lot of, general policy prescriptions to sort of fix the status quo that's been disenfranchising a lot of people. We see the way lots of people live. Lots of people live under the poverty lines. And just these policies have been able to help people. So these are the kind of prescriptions I want to make now. If I want to enact any type of immediate change, this is how we're going to help build and create a more prosperous society. And like, I don't really want to argue with or use the Twitter leftist terminology because I generally have a lot of disagreements with those guys. And
are you even a real leftist, or are you a fascist and hiding under the socialist label? And like, of course, I'm fucking memeing, but at the same time, like, this is my frustration. So I got 2 beers deep, and I was thinking about memeing. I'm happy we're able to have an intelligent conversation. But basically, like, so are you familiar? Oh shit, I just got wrecked. Are you familiar with like the drama of the past week? Like if you've stayed clear of the drama of like Destiny and RGR and Vosh and like all that kind of shit and Dylan Burns, if you stayed clear, then I don't know. Are you passingly aware of that drama?
I have heard of it, but I try to avoid Twitch politics drama.
Oh wow, then
it doesn't really interest me.
I mean, good for you.
It's generally really boring, and I only care to kind of sort of focus on this topic because it's the one that's like most relevant to me, and I enjoy debating. So of course, I kind of wanted to.
No, we can
talk about that, right?
and we can keep it on policy, and I'll get right back to it. We don't have to jump too far. But oftentimes when you're talking about like these leftists or whatever that are online, their principal concern is with like abolishing hierarchy. That's like the main thing that they're concerned with. And if there's if there's somebody who kind of moves away from the heterodoxy, regardless of their economic positions, regardless of like if they're an ally of convenience towards leftward movement, they tend to basically play a lot of purity politics, and then they tend to cannibalize each other. And that's part of the reason why I'm super hesitant about like social structures that basically say like, oh, we can eliminate hierarchy, or oh, we can decommodify basic human need, or this, that, the other. It's because number one, it feels utopian, and number two, I see the people who are their most like staunch and passionate advocates, and those people tend to be very cannibalistic when it comes to politics. And so while I'm not trying to like say like, oh, you have to own everything that your people on your side are doing, that's where I would kind of ask you to like visit like the economic concepts and the social concepts of your ideology and say like, do you think that human beings in general are capable of this? Do you think that we're capable of like abolishing hierarchy as much as possible? Do you think we're capable of decommodifying basic human need? Or like, so for instance, you identified as a socialist but not necessarily as a communist. Are you into communism? Do you want communism? Like, or is socialism kind of where you get off of it?
I'm into certain communist theory, but I generally identify as sort of a council socialist. It's kind of where I fall on the political
And can you, yeah, so maybe we can get into some utopian ideas, but you would probably have prescriptions because you'd be relatively intelligent. Would you mind walking me through what kind of your ideal state is?
Yeah, sure. So generally speaking, I think there should be, because I'm personally not one of those people who advocates for all this utopian grandeur bullshit like stateless, classless, moneyless. You hear that all the time. I don't like hearing sort of these Twitter leftists throw that around. Generally, the type of things I seek to abolish are a lot of injustices in the workplace, a lot of class injustices, a lot of like struggles. Because I see in the real world around me, and I see through statistics, people struggle financially, and that first and foremost, as someone who kind of identifies with, but isn't an orthodox Marxist, identifies with the struggle of people struggling monetarily.
Right. Well, and
So I'd say, as like myself, I'd seek to abolish sort of not like all of class, but kind of reduce the window, you know? Because I think that's the only logical, pragmatic thing humans can do. We can't really abolish class. Like, what does that mean? It's sort of a sweeping statement, and I just don't like sweeping statements like that. I kind of want one that's more like, we should reduce the window of sort of allowing, you know, these uber mega billionaires to come over here, use their money, again, lobby politicians. Because I don't know what you think, but generally speaking, I see the status quo in terms of how politics is done, and I see all of these politicians getting lobbied, having money spent in their direction to push policy these people want, and that just doesn't help people. It really doesn't. You see the types of things they push for. This sort of helps the already wealthy people, but we know there's more people who have been disenfranchised by the system than people who are wealthy. So I seek the pragmatic solution of sort of closing down this class window.
yeah, and again, like here's my question, because this is where we might be. I've had 2 beers, so I'm just gonna say we might be trying to skin the same cat from like 2 different directions. So basically, do you view that from the perspective of like, we need more democracy, we need more people power, or do you view it more as like, we need to use the state as a vehicle, we need to use like democratic or incremental processes? Do you view the people, like, do you view people power or state power as kind of your vehicle to affect these changes?
So I think we can safely say it's some kind of mix of the two. People power and state power can be used in
What
the
a
context of a liberal
fucking
democracy.
centrist.
Hey,
Centrist alert.
I personally identify as what's called a centrist Marxist, or I have that quality in my political leanings. But
Right. No, I appreciate you. It's just these are swear words where I come from.
Well, I wouldn't want to be copying a dirty centrist. I'm sure you're well aware of that.
Right.
But,
no. Okay, but can
generally speaking,
go ahead.
a reasonable person can only understand that we have to use any sort of means at our disposal to enact the changes we want. And as you know, if I have no ethical problems with what someone's doing to enact a change, I see no reason to use that methodology or that mechanism to enact the change I'm looking to, actuate.
Yeah, and here's my thing. This is where I get really frustrated, because people are like, "Oh, you care about people and you want workers to do well. You must be a socialist or a leftist or whatever." But then we start talking about like how to actually implement politics, and we just lose each other. And the reason why is because like I am somebody who very deeply cares about the United States Constitution. I'm somebody who very cares about like incrementalism or centrism. I wear that less as a meme and kind of more of like a badge of honor, where it's like, hey, if I hear a good idea, I'm going to use it. If I hear a bad idea, I'm going to reject it. And I'll fight you over every single one of them, and I'll try to be as informed as possible while I'm talking about them. So to bring that home, I don't trust the average person. If there was like a sweeping policy change that was like voted in for 51% of the population, I wouldn't trust that further than I could throw like a 300-pound man. So the point being that like my thing is like, the power of the people, while respectable and ultimately the end of government, always has to be checked by Republican rules. It always has to be checked by modalities of like a society that we have already agreed upon, like the freedom of conscience, freedom of state, right to self-defense, up to and including against the state, limited government where the government follows its own rules. These are all things that are enumerated in our Constitution that I very much care about. So
there's a policy I agree with. Like I'm not gonna. Not to cut you off here, sort of, but I just felt the need to interject on, I do care about certain rights upheld by constitutions, charters of rights, things of that nature, and just sort of hearing you speak here about the implementation of these policies, I don't like these sort of conceptions like overreach of state power. I think that that infringes on people's rights, and that's not a good thing, obviously. And generally speaking, I want to implement and push policy that people can agree on. And of course, I advocate personally for a type of representative socialist democracy where people generally elect people to represent their labor, right? They have sort of unionized bodies that are able to either be represented in a chamberial way in the Congress, or have a body that sort of helps write workplace legislation, gets it passed, promotes workers' rights, things of that nature. And I think that these are all generally beneficial progressions towards socialism. Another thing that I like, there's some great studies that actually back up sort of what happens when you get something associated with a strong left-wing government in terms of actuation of democracy, passing of democratic policies, things of that nature. And a lot of these democratic policies that get pushed, we usually see positive impacts because there's no one who really quite understands their material situation better than the person who's actually perceiving reality from their point of view. So I'm just kind of seeking to push any changes I can to make the world a better place. And I think generally we're not in the greatest spot right now, which is why I kind of want this forward march of progress until we can get to places that will allow for more, decommodification of things with the advent of automation, like you said. So these are the kind of things that I'm trying to advocate for and push here. I have a little bit of a problem when things get too autocratic, like there's a point of too much democracy and too much autocracy. And generally speaking, though, I push and I definitely lean on the end of democracy far more than I do autocratic societies, because democracy generally, we can see the results of previous democratic policies being passed. And even in countries like, the way people moved out of feudalism, the way people moved into capitalism is, again, the progress of giving people more rights to their own autonomy. And of course, capitalism, I have all the respect to sort of the foreground of capitalism and the Industrial Revolution and the way it ushered in our current day and lifted so many people out of poverty. But as society marches on more, we need to come up with a change to address the problems that we face right now.
Yeah, and can I say so for instance, like the reason why I'm not a socialist, I don't know if I identify as a socialist, I don't even identify as a leftist, is because like I do not think that like capital, the concentration of individual wealth is necessarily the problem, or that like basically expropriating that wealth from capital owners is going to be the thing that's going to solve society. So for instance, like I don't think that like Jeff Bezos or Mark Zuckerberg or whatever being fucking billionaires, I don't really give a shit if they were paying an effective tax rate of between like 10 and 20%. Effective being that like they couldn't even really claim business expenses. They literally just paid that into the system. And if the system as a result was better. And then if we were providing like essential social services, like, good quality education, public option for healthcare, good civics, good not good education, but like good opportunities. So universal pre-K, universal secondary education. Those would all be things that I would care about. But like basically like wrestling that wealth away from them, I don't really give a shit about. And the reason why is like I'm not trying to make apologetics for capitalism or like the myth of like the entrepreneur or whatever, like the fucking Elon Musk is going to take us to Mars and shit. But at the same time, I do think that there is a certain amount of energy that's like within capitalism where people who know that they basically, if their idea pays off, they will see their wealth just like skyrocket to the point of like kings will be jealous of them, basically. Then that's where like I think there's a certain amount of energy there from an entrepreneurial spirit that is good and based, and I'm perfectly okay with. And that's kind of where like for me the socialism thing jumps the shark, because I think I don't know that by banning that class of people you really change anything, except for maybe like some kind of like internal sense of justice. Like I don't know what you actually gain by basically banning the bourgeoisie from existing.
So see, there's a lot of great stuff that we can talk about here in terms of like, are you familiar with Keynesian economics at all?
Yeah, is that just kind of the hold on? Is that the decoupling? Yeah, is that the decoupling of like monetary policy from the way that the economy works? Basically, like if you get into a fucking rut, you can basically print more money in order to produce economic activity.
I mean, not just that, but we can talk about sort of the general idea of sort of inputting money into the economy, whether it's through, you receive that money through taxation, you receive that money through, you might have to inflate the economy a little bit, but generally speaking, your economy grows as a result, which usually isn't the methodology I prefer. I prefer obviously the taxation incentives, but generally the input into the economy helps improve overall output, right? So the way I look at this kind of thing is the more we input into the economy, invest in our people, the people will output as a result. So this is where I come on with the whole entrepreneurial spirit thing. People are just engineered to be creative. It's a fact, right? We all express ourselves in unique and different individual ways. I myself am an artist. I produce music. It's something I very much enjoy doing. And the reason that I need the security to know that my job won't be in jeopardy, be able to work, I'll be able to provide for myself. I'll be able to work a decent amount of hours without being subject to, 16-hour day or something to that effect, where I only have so much spare time to myself to actually focus on my personal goals and things of that nature. And I feel like that's where the sort of entrepreneurial creative spirit of pushing forward and creating progress is lost. And generally the type of environments we see now, things that were provided to us by unions are like active efforts of progressing society and economies. So if you see like the workforce get affected by things like having the 8-hour workday, having the weekend, having Labor Day, having all types of benefits, raised minimum wages. During the pandemic, we got provision of personal protective equipment, all that stuff, right? Like, as someone who worked in a retirement home throughout this pandemic, I think it's generally very, very beneficial to myself that I'm not spending a large chunk of my paycheck to buy boxes of reusable masks, ponchos, goggles, all of these face shields, things of that nature, right? And that I know I can show up to work, I can be safe, not get the pandemic or the virus, right? And carry on with my day without any of this stuff. And these are the kind of active marches towards progression that sort of leftist organizing causes and left-wing organization has gotten us. And this is why I generally think it's a positive trend to keep marching down that line of progression. We've seen such positive results from it, and there's empirics that prove the results of these policies, which is why I'm sort of essentially sitting here trying to pill you on these.
Yeah, which, I appreciate, but then the United States or Western Europe or whatever is not in a vacuum, and maybe it's because I'm younger than you, older than you, so I grew up kind of with the specter of communism. I was literally born maybe like a year or two before the Soviet Union fell. So basically, when I think leftism, I don't think 40-hour work week and a living wage. I don't think decent benefits. As a matter of fact, even if you're talking to boomers, these are things that they often talk about like the 1950s and 1960s American economy that they appreciated, that they had the opportunity to enjoy as children, where their parents were able to work like a decent job and mom was able to stay at home and cook for the kids and blah, blah, blah. Like, if you see a 1950s fucking detergent ad, that's like what boomers are defending. What they don't understand is that was a result of like mixed economy, redistributive economics, probably integrated by FDR, and as a result, basically that was probably the peak of mixed economy capitalism, was redistributive economics in the wake of World War II. But they want to basically defend the 1950s and 1960s lifestyle while advocating for 19th century anarcho-capitalist, policy where you get your fingers sliced off in a pickle jar and you just say, too bad about it, bitch. Here's your shitty, health insurance with like an $8,000 deductible. Good luck, suck it up. So that's kind of where there's a disconnect between like what mixed economy capitalist people view as the ideal and the policy that they think is going to like achieve that ideal. So when it comes to like what we're talking about, socialism or communism, I don't think gets there. I think mixed economy capitalism from fucking, the 1940s and 1950s gets us there. I don't need to jump the whole way. And when you're talking about jumping the whole way or whatever, you absolutely lose me. Because for all of your examples of like, left-wing thinkers got us the weekend and they got us, healthcare and they got us this and they got us that and they got us a living wage. Okay, true. Left-wing thinkers also got us, the Cambodian Khmer and the Soviet Union and Maoist China. And, most people who have committed mass slaughters in the 20th 20th century. We're Marxist-Leninists. And I'm not trying to do like the Red Scare thing just to do the Red Scare thing. But you kind of said like, oh, well, I think we should continue down this progressive tree because like, you know, I've seen the benefits of it. And I think that long term it's going to be benefit. Well, you know, I mean, that's kind of like saying that you're going to eat fucking broccoli for the rest of your life because you know that it's fucking good for you. But I'm pretty sure if you just eat broccoli, eventually you're going to shit yourself to death. So that's kind of my point, is that this all comes within balance, where I would say mixed economy capitalism is probably the, you know, as far as I can tell, until we have like fusion power, automation, throwing like 70% of the workforce out of a job, until we have economic tendencies like that. Maybe I think space mining, basically having the ability to go into space and have like nearly unlimited access to raw materials in space. I think at that point, once we pretty much have like gay automated space communism under the capitalist system, then it's inevitable that we're just going to say, hey, fuck it, dude. We don't really need you to come and work. Go ahead and stay home and fucking be a YouTuber. Like, who gives a fuck? But like, until that day, I'm not really advocating for this idea.
Yeah, so there's just like a couple of things I really wanted to kind of hone in on what you said there. With the sort of 1950s example of capitalism, there's a lot of problems you have to understand that come with that. Capitalism is subject to sort of boom and bust cycles. We see this with the economy constantly. We see the 2008 recession, housing crisis, right? We see all sorts of economic issues that we have, essentially, like, as stated, to put it simply, boom and bust cycles, right? So you can't really be reliant on that forever. And I just think that we have to act because we see our world sort of tumbling into these inevitabilities and problems that we face only under a capitalist model, where essentially profit maximization is a lot of the motive for how things are handled in our work environments. How we regulate things are essentially controlled by what's at profit interest, what's at production interest. When we overproduce, we have things like, and don't get me wrong, I'm a proponent of strong industry, but we take things into, you know, like sometimes certain industries go extreme with the amounts of production, and we're not investing enough into sort of these environmental things, stuff of that nature, right? And generally speaking, there's a lot of other stuff that we can do too to sort of offset this. And these are the policies that I'm implementing or trying to implement, the ones that offset the results of capitalism. But there's other stuff too, though, I wanted to touch on really quickly before.
Well, if you don't mind just me interjecting really quick, like, but this is what regulation is for. This is why I'm frustrated at the fact that there's like, there doesn't seem anybody who's interested in becoming like the next Teddy Roosevelt. I don't think that we should like nationalize portions of the economy. I think that we should basically like do some trust busting. We should be breaking up these monopolies. We should be breaking up these concentrations of capital power. But that would be a part of kind of like resetting a capitalist economy. That way, like, competition in the market can thrive. But I'll leave it there, and I'm interested to hear what you have to say next.
Yeah, there's just something I wanted to touch on really quickly. Do you think that it was sort of a socialist economic model that led something like the Khmer Rouge or the Soviet Union to fail? Because generally speaking, I don't think it's heavily correlated to their economies, if anything. It obviously has to do with the type of structure of power, if anything, first and foremost. I think we can think of it from that perspective. There's lots of problems I have with the implementation of Marxism, Leninism, and it's more on a philosophical level than it is an economic level. When we look at it from a philosophical level, we have to understand that Marxism, Leninism requires the implementation of vanguard parties, which lead to concentrations of power, which lead to, you know, of course, we're looking at these feudalist backwater countries that started out in really, really terrible material conditions. But when you concentrate power to people, you plan these economies, you accelerate their industrialization, which is what happened. But you leave the power in the hands of individuals, autocrats, these sort of, and you don't bolster democracy as much as you should, especially when it's sort of an imperative of a socialized economy. You're not really getting sort of this kind of like drastic effects of socialism. And even Lenin would have acknowledged that the USSR for most of its life was transitioning into socialism. But when you accelerate things to such a rapid extent, of course they're not going to be implemented as properly as you want them to be, right? You have to think about it. Like, you have to think pragmatics. That's important.
Yeah, really quickly though, because this is like an important interjection. So the point is that like, there's all these people with like highfalutin fucking ideas, decommodify basic human needs, and workers own the means of production and all that bullshit. And basically, what ends up happening is they couch political power, capitalizing on the disaffection of the working class in order to seize power, and then that's the result. The result is vanguard parties. The result is concentrated oligarchical power. The result is what I would call state capitalism, where it's like central control, but the government basically acts as a business, and they run it for their own effect, and it has all of the problems and nepotism of every like oligarch and monarchic society the world over. The reason why I get so frustrated, and it's not you, I appreciate you basically having like a more intelligent conversation rooted in reality and incrementalism and democracy and all that kind of stuff. I appreciate all that. But when we talk about these like highfalutin ideas, particularly, like, you can't just ignore the 20th century using the same like economic model and rhetoric and disaffection and all that kind of stuff that you're using in order to achieve nefarious ends. So if you want to say, Connor, first, we're going to be in mixed economy capitalism. Then we're going to go to the Nordic model. Then we're going to go to some kind of like pseudo-democratic model. Then we're going to have fusion. Then we're going to have automation. 70% of the workforce is going to be out of work anyways. And then maybe at that point, we'll implement like gay luxury space socialism or gay luxury space communism. I don't give a fuck, because that's like 500 years into the future. Whereas if you say, I'm a socialist, I'm a leftist, I believe in these ideas, and I'm going to kind of ignore, the crimes of the 20th century done in the name of these economic models and social models, then that's going to bug the fuck out of me. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
The problem with that is that's not inherent to the economic model. Other countries, like fascist countries that have existed throughout history, push these extreme violent measures. Even extremely capitalist countries, like sort of, you see an extremely.
But can I be a dick there and ask you where? Can I ask you where? Because basically this is like the frustration. It feels like a little bit of hiding the ball. I'm not saying that's what you're doing. I'm just saying that's what it feels like when I have these conversations. Is what other place do you see as implementing socialist ideas in a positive way that wasn't a dystopian nightmare? Like, what do you have from a historical example? And like, and I'm going to meme just a little bit, because I want the conversation to just be a little spicy. This is where like, if somebody says like, oh well, in Spanish Catalonia from 1942 to 1945, then I'm going to be like, all right, come on, man, like a 3-year model in some fucking backwoods motherfucker, like that's not a good example. Same thing with like Rojava or whatever. Like, come on, like, we need a better example. I'm excited.
Where I think a positive implementation of historical socialism took place. So actually, I was pretty fond of the Yugoslavian economy for a long time, and sort of the policies they've implemented there. A lot of the problems, Titoism wasn't actually a bad thing. It very positively affected the Yugoslav people. They have very strong nostalgia rates. A lot of people, and I know you're going to probably press the meme of nostalgia, but I can also vouch for the fact that 60% of people who lived in those countries would actually like a return to the former model. They had an incredibly low Gini coefficient paired with, of course, an incredibly high global GDP comparatively to other countries. In terms of global progress, a country of that size, which is a fairly moderately large country, right? If you looked at the size of Yugoslavia, it wasn't one of the biggest in the world, but it wasn't one of the smallest. It had strong economic growth from the 1950s or late 1940s when Tito took over to the early 80s, which is when Tito died. And a lot of the failures that get attributed to Yugoslavia are generally ones that were inevitable by the passing of Tito, which there would have been many solutions to solving this when he died. He should have handpicked some kind of successor, seen if the people of the countries agreed on it, and then implemented that. But he did not prepare for his passing because he kind of passed suddenly. And that kind of thing, paired with the drought of oil in Yugoslavia, led to the collapse of the economy. When you actually look at the implementation of workplace democracy and policies in the workplace, where there was some state control, but there was a lot of workplace democracy, the people were happy there. People had rights to work whenever they needed to. They were able to work. You can see a lot of these people who remember it fondly. They remember, like there's many Balkans, you talk to them and they see, oh, you don't talk about Tito like that. If you talk about Tito like that, I'll
Yeah, I'll pop you in the
I'll
face.
beat you up, I'll smack you or whatever. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but
they
can
get really upset about Tito.
Well, yeah, but the reason why they get super upset about Tito, this is kind of like where, we have to look at our political and economic models and see what other historical models they did. As far as I understand, like Tito basically moved away from like the Soviet command and control economy. And as a result, he actually had a split with Moscow. And because he had that split with Moscow or whatever, that basically Yugoslavia went even more independent. And he's like, well, fuck y'all, we'll still be, political allies compared to the rest of the world, but we're going to do our own thing, and we're going to be more market economy. Not only that, as based as Tito may have been, I still think that most people, including his fans, would admit that he was a benevolent dictator, and that when he needed to crack some fucking heads, he cracked some fucking heads. So that's kind of the question, is like, so if you asked me what is this model most reminiscent of, it wouldn't be like Marxist communism or like a state capitalism maybe, or some kind of like hybrid, but it would actually be like benevolent monarchy or benevolent dictatorship, and that's kind of the thing. So where I could concede that a mixture of governmental intervention and like free market economy overseen by an intelligent and benevolent dictator could result in positive economic outcomes, I'm not willing to sacrifice, like, so for instance, if you're like, hey, Tito's been reborn, we actually cloned him and we could have him implement like a socialist utopia tomorrow, I'm still going to tell you to fuck off. You know what I'm saying? So
But there's other things that I feel like that we're failing to account for here. Yugoslavia was a highly democratic country. They had high levels of democracy, especially in the workplace, as well as electing presidents and prime ministers from each of the republics, right? So there were 6 republics in Yugoslavia, and they had, again, elections. I can't remember if it was annually or biannually to replace the presidents of these republics. These people were constantly rotating. There was constant struggle on the power. They were very much subject to the will of their people. The only person who really constantly remained in power as sort of the head of the party, because he did lead the party through the Yugoslav, after World War II, the revolution they had there. He did lead them through that. So he did remain head of the party, which made him president of Yugoslavia, the United Republics. But generally speaking, when we actually look at the economy, it wasn't so much this crackdown from a benevolent dictator. It was this strong level of democracy within the workplace. The state generally kept their hands off unless they needed to intervene. And of course, you were talking about the, ability Yugoslavia had to, again, support itself. It was a very self-sufficient economy. It was part of the non-alignment movement. It had strong economic growth for about 25 to 30 years, which is almost the whole of its existence. And there's just so many other things I can praise this economic model for. And the fact of the matter is, when a country is able to produce for itself, and we're able to bolster democracy in a country that was, not exactly the greatest place to be during World War II and prior to that, and then you look at a country like Yugoslavia after World War II, the prosperous economy they had, the incredible rates of satisfaction they had within the country, and all of this other stuff, I think it's safe to say that Tito wasn't just a benevolent dictator, so to speak. He might have been the head of this party, might have been the president, but everyone else and all the members of that party were subject to sort of wills of their people. I think it's important to include that as a factor.
Well, and I'm perfectly okay with everything you just said. But so for instance, like, I'm a huge fan of Marcus Aurelius. Dude's been dead for like 1500 to 1500 years, I want to say. So dude's been dead for 1500 years, but he was an emperor. So like, while he has a whole bunch of base shit to say, and he implemented a bunch of good policy, and he whipped the shit out of a bunch of barbarian Gauls like myself. There's a whole bunch of things that I can like harken back to where I can say he was a good ruler. He managed a good economy. He managed a good army. He managed a good imperial system. Commodus was a fucking shitbag, and he should have realized that. But hey, whatever, fuck it. But basically, like, what I would say is, while I could recognize the value of the man or the fruits being born through their rule, that doesn't change the fact that I'm not going to be calling for basically reinstituting the Roman Republic tomorrow, no matter how much my fucking audience wants me to. So basically, what I would say is that's where, for me, the trade-off just doesn't make sense. So for instance, like, if you're saying like, oh, well, in a catastrophic economy, we did have somebody who was able to basically rule with a soft glove, not just an iron fist. They did mixed economy capitalism mixed with like market socialism. It was super fucking base, and it came, it had a whole bunch of positives. Kind of looking at like the total, what we're talking about, like one example out of how many dozens of states decided to be leftist or socialist and were fucking nightmares as a result. Again, so I'm gonna smack you with a fucking olive branch. The olive branch is if we get to gay luxury space communism and basically basic human needs are so widely available and free that it doesn't even matter anymore, then I'm down for whatever crazy bullshit y'all want to do. But until that day, I'm not going to be advocating for this, identifying as a socialist, identifying as a leftist. I'm just not going to be doing it. It's just not going to happen.
Right. Another thing is, though, like, the reason I brought up Tito is because you asked me of a past example that works. So I'm trying to show you that something similar to an economic model, I can pose this economic model to you. I can hand it to you. I can say, look, we can make revisions. We can do all this stuff. And yeah, I don't want, despite being a great guy, I don't want Marcus Aurelius to come and be president of the United States right now. The fact of the matter is,
although compared to who we have, I guess I could consider it.
yeah. Bojack and bad. We all get it. But
well, not just that, but Orange Man bad too. So.
But the broader point I'm trying to make here is that I can show you effective modifications as a transitory process in American capitalism today to solve some of the problems we face in our economies. And these are the kind of things that we can do to help the world out.
So how do you feel about China?
How do I feel about China? I have very, very mixed opinions on China. I'm generally against the Chinese government and a lot of the bad things they've done because there's a lot of policies and overreach from the state that I disagree with. And there's some things in China that I think are okay in terms of economic policies, but mostly I don't really like how they manage their economy. I acknowledge it's a socialist country, generally of the variant state socialism, as opposed to something like Marxism, right? It kind of fell off the Marxist wagon. However,
but you understand
socialism.
You understand the typical frustration though, with these kinds of conversations is just so if we're talking about something bad that China's done. And by the way, I appreciate you just saying, socialist or whatever. But that's the thing is when I get into these conversations or whatever, China's not socialist. The workers don't own the means of production. And, basically, workers don't own the means of production and basic human needs aren't decommodified. That's not socialism. And that's state capitalism. As a matter of fact, everything that China's done wrong for the past 30 years or whatever. So during the revolution, that was just Mao's fault because Mao got a little too crazy with it. And then during the past 30 to 40 years, that's capitalism's fault. And so that's where I feel they want it both ways, where it's is it capitalism? Is it socialism? Or are people just fucking evil? And my answer is people are fucking evil. So I have to tend on the side of individual human liberty. So if you were talking about workers owning the means of production, meaning that every fucking business turns into a Publix voluntarily or through state tax and loan incentive, where the workers own the business and as a result they can retire with a comfortable fucking wage. Awesome, sweet, don't give a shit. But then where it jumps the shark for me is if you were to say, actually, not only do I want that, but I want the state to mandate that by fiat. And anybody who doesn't do that, we're going to expropriate their wealth. Because basically what ends up happening is I think you build the kind of oligarchy and if you got a Tito, awesome, great. We have a benevolent dictator, fucking, based. We got Marcus Aurelius in the house. But if you have a fucking Mao or a Stalin, then you're completely fucked. And that's where a lot of socialist experiments tend to devolve into an oligarchy or devolve into a fucking pseudo monarchy, and that's super frustrating.
Yeah, so there's other things I really want to address here. When we're talking about socialism, definitionally, I think it's important to think about the actual definition of socialism. It's collectivization of the means of production. People disingenuously not call China a socialist country. If the collective is supposedly acting in the interest of its people, which the Chinese Communist Party is supposedly doing, of course it's going to be a socialist country. They represent the interest.
But can you understand why that definition would be frustrating? Because if you're the economy works in the interest of the people. So are the Nordic countries socialist now?
Wait, the thing is, though, you're not understanding is that 55% of the assets are owned by the state in China. So this is like a true fact about the actual economics, policies, and state-owned enterprise. Plus, the Chinese Communist Party has delegated representatives going to workplaces as well, and they essentially have an iron glove over the economy. Now,
what would you call that
socialism. Well, it's state socialism, right? It's the state which collectivizes. It's the representative body of the people, despite how much I disagree with it or agree with it, right? Acting in the interest of its people. The things I advocate for, though, aren't these large concentrations of power in the hands of the government. These are the kind of things where we can implement policies. We can, of course, we're already offering so many types of loans, and this is the problem I have with such status quo type of governance, is that these status quo governments are giving loans to these megacorps to try and keep them afloat because they make up such a large part of our economy. We can move some of this funding. We can move funding out of certain areas where it's obviously overinvested and put it into these sort of cooperatives, give them a chance to grow, because cooperatives are a very prosperous and prolific model. And even in America, there's 9% of the economy is cooperatives. They hold over $3 trillion in assets. They're showing to be a success. We can take statistics from these cooperatives in America. We can see the types of things they do for their workers. They have anywhere from a 9 to 19% increased rate of productivity on average. They have a whole bunch of other merits. There's potential for workers' incomes to grow by 70%. They have 45% lower turnover rates, and they're 30% less likely to fail within the first 5 years of their operation. So I think it's important to cite some of these statistics and generally go, yeah, we've looked at the studies, we've looked at the stats, we've looked at the numbers. We can concretely come up with policy to sort of usher in this new era without having some ridiculous government overreach, without having some sort of ridiculous concentration of power, and giving people, again, sort of a more democratized economy without doing anything to concentrate power into the hands of the, elite oligarchic ruling class of America or whoever it is. And these are sort of the simple policy prescriptions I make to make the world a better place, try to solve the problems and the failures I see in terms of how capitalism is responding to people's economic, and meeting their economic needs.
Well,
I just don't really want to see the status quo pushed as much as it is, because I generally have a problem with the way things are going. We see, rates of increased poverty throughout America. It's just a striking issue overall.
Yeah, but and again, so I think we might be circling a little bit, just because basically I can go with you until I can't. And what I mean by that is, if all socialists were similar to you, then I would be like, okay, I will help you achieve this amount of things, and then here's where we go our separate ways, right? That would kind of be where I was at. But most socialists, or at least most internet socialists, are not like you. And so as a result, I have to draw a lot more hostile lines. So if the whole goal is to improve the average material conditions of the average person, I'm not a total utilitarian or whatever, but obviously I want the most amount of good shit for the most amount of people. I tend to approach it from hierarchized power. Basically, I wish I was Tito. That's kind of what's going on. But knowing that the corruptions that come with power and the corruptions that come with temptation, I am thankful that I live in a democratic republic that checks the power of selfish and shitty people. And whenever somebody says hey, I got a sweet new idea for how to organize society, I'm just going to be super skeptical unless I can see the model borne out. So if your whole thing is let's give people more loans so they can do more worker co-ops, that's the least objectionable fucking thing I've heard in a while, so I'm fine with it.
Well, there's some really important stuff to address here. I see these checks and balances that you're talking about as not being effective enough, because I see so many problems that exist when they just don't have to. All of these problems that exist can be checked with these simple policy prescriptions I'm pushing for, and I'd really appreciate it if you came and joined me. And I'm trying to sort of move away from this super, essentially what I'd like to consider some kind of neoliberal hellscape. We live in this sort of wishy-washy, crony capitalist society. Everyone probably agrees with that statement to some degree, right?
Oh, even the right wing, there's a fucking problem. Yeah, I was about to say, there's a fucking problem when the right wing is talking about economic redistribution. That's when you know you're in fucking trouble.
Right, exactly. So I'm sure you agree with me on this. Exactly, which is why I'm essentially trying to go, Connor, come here, please. I'm spitting some facts here. I'm correct about things. And I've got numbers and statistics that back up all of the points I'm saying. This is all data driven. This is why I'm so largely in favor of worker cooperatives. And the fact of the matter is, while it hasn't been implemented on a mass scale, I think that enough of the economy is cooperativized to where we can start giving a chance to let the cooperative sector grow. Right? If we have such a portion of the economy that is worker cooperatives right now, we see the merits of cooperatives, which is, it is at 9% of the economy right now, American economy. And these cooperatives have borne out very, very positive results. And there's very strong evidence to suggest that worker ownership of companies increases firm productivity, right? And it gets more significant, more and more capital and shares are accumulated and given and distributed out to the employees, as well as we can see other things like, in terms of workplace democracies, things like high level of job satisfaction were just like out there. They were way rapidly increased, and there was so much merit to all of these policies when they were implemented. We saw low stress of physical symptoms, low position stresses, absentee workers were not a problem in these companies because they were actually happy to go to work.
Okay, I'm gonna say two things. All right. Number one, if you're saying, "Hey, Connor, help me get more worker cooperatives," then I will fucking help you up until the point you start putting estrogen in my fucking cereal. Okay, that's number one. Number two.
Well, luckily, Connor, I'm not a huge estrogen and cereal kind of guy. I'm actually fairly socially moderate.
Okay, well,
incredibly socially moderate. Actually.
So if you want help getting more worker cooperatives in the American economy, I will bring up Publix as a worker cooperative model every single time I get an opportunity. Okay, that's number one. Number two, I would
with me all the way.
Okay, well, probably not going to be with you all the way. But what I would say is we can go as far as we can, and then that's where we can't. And then also here's another thing. Learn when to take a yes. So this is like, this is kind of my thing, is like, we don't have to agree on everything, and we probably won't. But if me saying like, hey, American workers are kind of getting fucked over in the economy right now. They're a bit, basically a lot of them are working without hope of retirement or hope of owning a home or hope of owning a car. And basically as a result, the economy is fucked up, and it's a K-shaped economy where people like me are going to be doing a lot better, but a lot of other people are going to be really fucked over, and they have very dire circumstances that are going to radicalize people. And we need to do something as a result. Let's have a public option multi-payer healthcare system. Let's incentivize worker cooperatives through loans and whatever, and let's basically make sure that we have good education systems, pre-K through secondary education, because it's inexpensive and it pays dividends, right? These are all allegedly left-wing policies, but I would see them as necessary in order to create a strong society. So basically, I can walk with you up until that ledge, and then guess what? That's fucking further than anybody else on the right wants to go with you. So I can fucking grab them by the nose ring and fucking drag them that far, but that's pretty much where we're going to part ways. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Okay, so then I have something really important to say to you right now.
Huh?
Because it feels like the type of, in order to get these policies passed, you need to actively push for them. You need to do these kind of pushing of policies, getting them out there. And I would just like to see, at least in your rhetoric, you engage in somewhere like, if you were to speak on the efficacy of these, because whenever I see someone talk about economics and they just tend to bear on the side of capitalism, they don't touch on the merits of worker cooperatives.
Sorry, hey, can you hold 1 second? Oh my God. Somebody was playing techno at full volume in my game lobby. Give me 1 second. If he's still doing there, I'm going to end my game. I'm so sorry to everybody in chat. It's fucking full volume. What an asshole.
Yeah, I'm not a techno appreciator either.
We're about an hour in, and y'all are doing great. I appreciate you guys.
Yeah.
Well, glad you could moderate this debate, Rinyal.
Yeah, moderate. You guys are moderating your fucking selves.
Well, listen, I try
Everybody
not to
give a shout out to Rinyal for being there.
Yeah, I try not to be a dickhole unless I absolutely have to be. So, on the panel scene, you have to be a little bit more aggressive.
It's greatly appreciated.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some people that I personally don't like to, play too nice with. They can be pretty difficult, but I've always seen you as a good faith debater, and I very much was looking forward to the last couple weeks for talking to you. I thought this would be a very productive conversation. But I guess what I'm going to try to say now is I just don't want you to be one of those people who is tolerating the status quo in their rhetoric. I would like to actively see you reinforce, at least if I can provide you with the merit of worker cooperatives, which I've tried to do this whole time. I can send you the studies. I can do all of this stuff. I would like a very, very understanding, very rational right-wing voice like yourself to come out here and actually agree with the statistics and data and sort of reflect on some of that in your videos or your streams or whatever you do.
Yeah, and let me give some advice though. So from a rhetorical standpoint, this is actually for all the socialists and leftists out there. So socialism, it has an ugly history. Okay, it just does. The history of the 20th century, it's a brutal history, and whether you agree with whether or not like Soviet Russia or Maoist China was actually socialist, before you guys, that's who claimed that label. So what I would say is a little bit more pragmatics when it comes to rhetoric and say like, oh, no. When workers actually have like reasonable wages, and they have like a 40-hour work week and they have the ability to invest in themselves, that's actually socialism. I understand that from like a personal standpoint, you want to say that this is like incremental towards socialism because you want to advocate towards your thing. But at the same time, like you kind of gotta meet people where they're at, basically. And so that's where I would say is like, it's some of this shit is mixed economy capitalism. Sorry, bud, because I don't see any decommodification of basic human needs. I see workers owning the means of production, which is still like it's nowhere in capitalism does it say that workers cannot own the means of production. It basically says whatever economic models work will support that. That's pretty much capitalism as far as I understand. So that's where I would say you gotta take the W's where you can find them. You gotta take the compromises where you can find them. And I know we were trying to avoid Twitch politics drama or whatever, but basically what I would say is I was saying earlier that part of the problem is purity testing on the left, where like you just can't take a fucking W, right? You can't have somebody be like, hey, I'm not perfect, but I agree with you on this one policy, and I'll help you with this one policy. And then if that person doesn't agree with the remainder of your prescriptions, then you call them a piece of shit. Specifically, I'm thinking of like RGR, Doe, and fucking Destiny and shit. So basically,
right. So as an individual leftist, I advocate and push for and strive for unity among left-wing circles. When we can push policies, we can get them passed. The problem is, and this is the point I've been trying to stress this whole debate, is that I want you to come away from the status quo, sort of be a rational pragmatist like me, understand where, as much as you agree to, push the economy and in a direction that helps working class people with the policies, the facts I can give to you right here, right now, help to grow and bolster compromises where I can, which is what I've been doing this whole time. I've been trying my absolute best. Like, and you may have extended an olive branch to me. I'm trying to, return the olive branch. We're both handing olive branches to and fro with each other, I'd like to say. I think that's a very fair statement, if you agree with that.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. That's perfectly fine.
I think we've both been very, very nice to each other this debate, very charitable. And
hey, listen, Dylan, you're a fucking piece of shit, and I hate you, and your politics are awful, and you should eat a butt.
Well, it's true. Most people would agree with you on that statement. However, I'm going to say here, like, when you look at the past and the history of socialism, you have to understand where it was coming from, with what intentions it was brought about, and of course, how they actually acted out these policies. There was ways in which things were done. These are more why they're unethical, as opposed to the economic policies that they've enacted. I don't like there's that huge understanding that we have to talk about when we're talking about socialist history, right? So, like, take, for example, the Soviet Union. Soviet Union, Vanguard Party, concentrated power, bad. Take, for example, China, Vanguard Party, concentrated power to Mao. People's Communes, The Great Leap Forward, bad. All of that stuff is not inherent to socialist policies, though. In a current 21st world or century world, I understand the pragmatics and I understand what to push for to get what I want done. Twitter leftists and I, we bicker, we fight, all leftists fight. It's something they do. It's just a habit. I don't want that. I don't want that world. That's a terrible world. That's a terrible place to be. What I want is for people to unify over collective policies we can agree on, change the status quo, because the status quo and standard of what we have, the current state of affairs is just not helping people. It's just not doing enough to progress society forward, which is why I'm trying to bring you over and agree with the policy prescriptions I'm making. And it sounds like you do agree with these policy prescriptions. The problem I think you're having is mostly with the community at large. The left-wing community at large, the left-wing circles, the type of rhetoric some people engage in. That's the problem. It's not the policy I'm pushing.
It depends. So for instance, like this is actually really interesting. So the problem is, I think that there's a certain amount of justified hierarchy. I know I'm not talking to the average fucking leftist when I'm saying this, or I'm not talking to you when I say this. Okay. So what I would say is that there's a lot of people who view hierarchy or unjustified hierarchy as like a severe problem, and they don't know where to draw the lines. I think competence is something that absolutely has to be protected. I think that there's there's also lines to be drawn around like bosses. Like oftentimes a lot of like anti-leftist rhetoric gets around bosses. There's bosses who are a bunch of fucking parasites who basically capitalize off of the the labors of their subordinates, and they don't really do shit. And then there's bosses who work their fucking ass off in order to create institutions that are well founded, well thought out, and basically have great infrastructure, and those institutions can perpetuate themselves into centuries because they were thought out so well by their original founders. So that's where for me, like, a degree of nuance, like I'm not used to experiencing this level of nuance in a conversation with a leftist. So that's kind of where I'm saying, like, that's where I get skeptical, because if you think of leftism as like kind of like advocating for the people, I'm perfectly fine advocating for the fucking people, but there's like there's this great quote, I think it's from like the movie Men in Black. It's like individual people are smart, but groups of people are like dumb, panicky, shitty animals, and you know it. And that's kind of where, for me, the indictment of socialism is not just the indictment of like some kind of like social structure. It's also just the indictment of unchecked power, mob rule, and this like utter faith in democracy and people power. I don't believe in that shit for a fucking heartbeat. So when you were talking about earlier in the conversation, when you were saying like, oh well, I'm not like a pure Democrat, or I'm not a pure institutionalist, I think these powers have to flex with each other. You already identified as a fucking centrist Marxist or something like that. I think you earned that title through that perspective, because most people do not have that perspective at all.
So there's some things I really want to address here, because I feel like it's super, super important to state that within the worker cooperative model, there is hierarchy that does exist. It's just under the principles of democracy, allowing people to elect their leaders in the same way that you would in a sort of governance or governing body. People are allowed to choose their CEOs. People are allowed to choose their wages. And of course, when you understand the process of running a workplace, you understand the CEO takes on more responsibility, right? I don't think there's any disagreement with that. CEOs bear a large responsibility when we're talking about how they run their corporations. When a CEO runs their corporation, yeah, they're going to want a little more money. So workers are going to fairly decide and ration among themselves how to democratically institute something like a CEO to manage tasks that all these workers are not going to want to, pitch in on. They can agree that, oh, we don't want to talk about what kind of printer paper we're going to order. We're going to have, this relegated to
Damn, the printer lady.
Resource management. Yeah, the damn it, Pam, printer lady. We're going to want her. But we need to move away from the current model. The current model is not allowing people, because again, you've talked about self-actualization, autonomy, and I'm talking about self-actualization and autonomy. We're on the same page principally here. So what I'm trying to get, though, is get it to you that we need to move away from what we have now, because we're not allowing ourselves to actualize in the fullest extent we can. The fullest extent we can actualize is by allowing people to choose things within the workplace. It's just
So,
and there's merits to workplace democracy.
Let me,
right? I'm sure you agree with that.
But let me nitpick right here, since this is actually one of my things. So for instance, if we're talking about like unions, right? and we're talking about like a social culture. If the unions are intelligent enough to say, hey, there has to be a certain amount of profit built into the business. A certain amount of R&D has to go back into the business. A certain amount of this, that, the other has to go back into the business. And as a result, we're going to accept this wage. Then I'm perfectly fucking fine with that. The problem that I see, hold on one second. The problem that I see with unions in general is oftentimes, particularly in a capitalist culture, particularly in a winner-takes-all culture, particularly in a material culture that might feel deprived sometimes, there are often attitudes that say, so for instance, my good friend Destiny, he wouldn't say that a union's job is to negotiate fair wages within like the profit structure and R&D structure of a business to keep it healthy and viable into the future. His thing would be an adversarial relationship where it would be the union needs to push as hard as it fucking can for its individual members, and the capital owner needs to push for their interests as much as possible, and as a result they'll come to like some kind of negotiated compromise that keeps it in business. If people were going in with that kind of mentality where they're like, well, fuck the business, we'll just do whatever we want because I'm gonna get my money from it and I'm gonna get as much money as I possibly can, then this all falls apart super quick. And oftentimes, like a lot of criticisms, it might be an appeal to nature, but basically people tend to be like super selfish fucking assholes, and that's where you seem like a sensible and nice guy, and I appreciate that about you. But as you got to keep it in your fucking calculus. How is my system going to be used by the worst people imaginable? And then you have to come up with some kind of counterbalance for when the worst people imaginable are in power. So for instance, with capitalism, it assumes the worst people are in power, which basically says that everybody advocates for themselves. And that's how you fucking handle it. Whereas if you're coming up with some different model, you have to keep in mind that whatever social institution you can create can and will be wielded by nefarious characters.
Yeah, so there's this, like, generally speaking, I just want to get in here because I feel like you kind of said a lot there. That was a lot. There's a lot to unpack with this statement, right? First thing is first, we need to talk about the sort of assumptions of putting the worst people in power. You agree that we did that on capitalism. You've conceded that the union dynamic is part of our culture. It's embraced by the capitalist culture we live in. This is a huge thing. It's adversarial because everyone looks at their own self-interest. The thing is with socialist and worker cooperative style entities, right? People are also going to be looking for their own best interest, which is objectively true. It's just part of how humans function and operate when they deal with the world around them. But now there's more checks for people who are in positions of power. We don't have that right now. We have none of that right now in this sort of current state of affairs. We have none of that. We have capitalist class people who own and subjugate their workers to the, again, like a lot of really, really ridiculous things. Like recently, I just got wrongfully terminated from a job that is it was a super, super terrible experience there. I won't go on any further on that, but like, and right now my union's not doing much to help me. So what would I have needed to help me counterbalance that kind of thing, right? Well, I probably would need some kind of more active representation in the workplace, be able to make my voice heard, but that's not the case right now. We're just kind of dealing with this current structure. We're allowing ourselves to live in it, and we're allowing ourselves to be subjugated to the interest of the capitalist class. That's essentially what I feel like you're vouching for, and you're kind of excusing with the statement, we need to look at human nature. Capitalism already assumes that the worst people are in power. I agree. The worst people are in power. How are we going to check that? How are we going to balance that? Well,
let me
is going to be a positive solution. We see a lot of positive associations.
But let me I'm not like a pure Democrat. So let me address how you would do this. You would basically make the things that make life good mandatory. And I think the Nordic model already does this. So for instance, like having 35 to 40 hour work weeks with a living wage. That's already mandated under the fucking Nordic model, either through governmental fiat or through union negotiation. I know there's places like Denmark that don't even have like a minimum wage. They literally have just like really strong unions. So either way, they have reasonable work hours, reasonable wages, right? That's number one. Number two is the ability to have some level of social mobility through education. So you would make high quality education, pre-K through secondary education, mandatory, well-funded, well thought out, well-structured, well-built, all that kind of stuff. That would be second. Then third would probably be universal healthcare. And basically the reason why I say that is because if you had a public option with most places are mixed payer systems, right? So Canada, Germany, all those places, they're mixed payer with a public option. So then at that point, if you're somebody who's signing up for the social contract, you have good education, you become an adult, you're able to explore your opportunities within a market-based system. You're able to find a vocation that meets your needs. No matter what you do, you'll have a living wage. No matter what you do, you'll have some level of health care. And no matter what you do, I forget what the other social pillar I was talking about was. But because you have these social pillars, you're able to live a good life almost no matter what. Whereas under like a socialist model or a communist model or whatever, you're introducing all of this like new conflict that I don't even know whether or not it's fucking necessary in order to have a happy, healthy society. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure like if you look at societies that are currently at like the highest of the happiness and health,
global happiness index. Yep.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's like the mixed economy capitalist model.
Yeah, so just let me get in here really quick to add that you already agree with me on a lot of these fundamental presuppositions about healthcare, education, pillars for society. I have another pillar for society, democracy, very great, thing we've introduced, very positive results. And I basically the thing is
pure
your show
Republican.
So I believe in representative, which I'm not sure if that's what you mean when you say Republican.
Yeah, sure. Representative's fine.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Representative. So you agree with me on that level. That's how it would function in workplaces. That's how it functions in a cooperative model. There will be levels of representative democracy in it. And I'm trying to show you this. So I would love to, I can back this up with examples, with statistics, whatever you need.
Buddy, I've already said yes 7 times. I don't know how many more times I can say yes.
Right, that's the thing though. But the style of thing you're going for is this skepticism, the skeptical approach to this. You're just kind of going.
Well, I'm skeptical.
I'm okay with the Nordic model, and then getting hands off from there. No,
well, and the reason I'm probably
really quickly.
Sure,
I would let Dylan finish real quick.
Yeah,
sure.
Just before, it's all yours after. But I just want to say the thing is though, is we're talking about these things that you've already agreed with me on, and then there's the numbers to show. Democracy works. Democracy within the workplace would also work. It's already working, and your skepticism, I just think, is unfounded. The status quo we see is not a very good thing. The way it's treating people and implementing and impacting their lives is just not very helpful, and we have to move away from it. And of course, I'm giving you a way to move away from it. And I know you already agree with me. You said yes a million times, but you keep showing your skepticisms toward it when I'm just trying to make general progress here that's already proven to be good where it's been implemented.
Well, right. Okay. But this is my issue. Okay. So basically, what I would say is, you're saying we need to move away from this, and you can't take my yes. You need more of a yes. You need me to be even more, basically on board with socialism or market economy socialism or market economy capitalism as a stepping stone towards your ultimate vision or whatever. Number one, I don't think I can get there. Number two, the reason why I can't get there is because of the thing that's not being said in the room right now, which is basically you would have to have governmental prohibitions against single capital owner institutions. And for me, I would basically say you can incentivize cooperative models using governmental loans in order to try to get people a better quality of life and this, that, the other. You can incentivize unions and all that kind of stuff. But the second that it comes down to somebody basically sticking a gun in your face and saying nope, you can't participate in this voluntary exchange because of this, that, the other, then I fall off the fucking wagon. And because a government that would be powerful enough in order to prohibit a single capital owner or board owned economic institution is an insanely powerful government. And then I think that kind of gets into the whole benevolent dictator shit that we were talking about earlier, where it's okay, cool. When you have Tito, awesome. But when you have a bunch of fucking dickholes like Mao or fucking Stalin, then it's a fucking nightmare. And so that's where, for me, it's like, I can't, this is why I keep saying I'll go up to you until a point, and then we don't go together anymore. And the reason why we don't go together anymore is because I think a government that is capable of instituting a socialist model, decommodification of basic human needs through probably, let's face it, some level of state command, and also, basically workers own the means of production, not through some voluntary incentive of what we were talking about, worker-owned cooperatives, but through state fiat. I think that's the exact kind of powerful fucking government that could reinstitute the nightmares of the 20th century, and I'm not fucking interested. So that's where I'm at.
Okay, so
real quick, Dylan. We've got about a half hour until we need to go into closing statements. I just wanted to let that be known to you guys, just in case that changes anything. Yep.
Yeah, okay. So the thing I wanted to say, though, is you're talking about this. So the first things first is you're normalizing our approach to things currently. That's another one issue I have with you. And I understand that you can agree with me fundamentally up until a point. But the thing I'm talking about here, have been talking about here, is not drastic government overreach. Nothing like that. The thing I've been talking about this whole time, and I'm going to have to continue to nail it in, is simple government policies that modify the way we distribute our resources right now, which they're already being moved. They're already being handled by the government itself. So we can just talk about how we want these resources moved into a type of worker cooperative model that I've been advocating for, again, this whole time. We're not talking about a huge shift in the dynamic. We're talking about a gradual shift in the dynamic. We're not allowing to anyone to concentrate power. I haven't even spoken about changing the government structure we deal with today in terms of American, constitutional republic, right? I haven't talked about changing any type of representative democracy. I believe in representative democracy to the core. It's something I believe in. And all I'm trying to do is push you and move you to a state of agreeing with what I'm trying to say here, because you're like, okay, I agree with you, but Mao.
Yeah.
But Stalin. But
yes.
That's the problem, though. Do you understand the issue I have with that statement? Because Stalin, Mao, all of these guys have nothing in common with their processes. You just kind of seen the word socialism. You see the word socialism.
No. That's not.
It feels like you have an association with the word with socialism, though, and you just bring.
Why wouldn't I have an association of the word? Why wouldn't I have an association of the word socialist with Mao or Joseph Stalin?
So the thing is you do have the association because of historical attempts. But what we're talking about here, when we're talking about policy, has nothing to do with these people. Like, absolutely nothing.
Okay, so let's get into this. This might be meaty. I'll apologize to you in advance if it gets a little heated. No. Okay? Basically, what these people said is the same shit that you said. And the only thing that they said differently is that we're going to be radical about it. That's literally the fucking difference in their rhetoric between them and you. So to pretend that it has nothing to do with you, this is like me saying, like, I love chocolate ice cream. And I want everybody to have chocolate ice cream. And chocolate ice cream is fucking based, and I want the world to have fucking chocolate ice cream. But if you love chocolate ice cream the way that I love chocolate ice cream, then I'm going to give it to you on a voluntary basis. And somebody else walks up, and they're like, hey, fucking chocolate ice cream is based, and I'm going to shove it down your fucking throat. You both love fucking chocolate ice cream. So let's not pretend that you guys are like, that far off. The difference is in the level of force. So the level of force applied, that's fucking based. I'm happy that you're a libertarian or you're liberal or centrist or whatever when it comes to the implementation of your ideas. I think that's fucking based, okay? But at the same time, saying that you're not both fucking chocolate eaters is not right, okay? You both fucking love chocolate, with the metaphor here being fucking socialism, all right?
Right. So the problem I have with this statement, though, is we haven't looked at any of the actual policy prescriptions stated by someone like Mao or Stalin that I've actually agreed with.
Do you think that they didn't care? Hold on. Do you think that they didn't care about, like, moving to a socialist model? Do you think that they didn't care about leftism or destroying power hierarchies or any of that shit? Do you think, like, were these people right wing? Like, what are we talking about?
So we can concretely say, and even Lenin himself has vouched for being part of the right wing of the communist parties and leaders, and Stalin is obviously much more of an extreme of that, of concentrated power. A lot of these people don't engage with or share any of the things I agree with, and I just felt like that was kind of a disingenuous analogy of what I'm pushing for, or who I agree with, and what I'm trying to get done here, because the things I'm trying to get done here are obviously not the same as Mao, not the same as Stalin. Stalin, again, like if you look at the atrocities committed by someone like Mao, where you see the Great Leap Forward, you see, again, these really, really failed, disastrous people's communes, or you see someone like Pol Pot who tried to de-urbanize the country. Like,
but you don't think there's any kind of analogy between the power wielded by these people and the power that would be necessary in order to force a single ownership model in the United States?
So yeah, I haven't talked about using a forced or a sort of like, I don't want to prohibit at all right now, prohibit any type of capitalist ownership in an economy.
So what's your timeline?
For a democratized. So what am I trying to do here? Is I'm trying.
No, I'm saying what's your timeline? Like so, for instance, you're saying one of the important things. Yeah, one of the important things that you just said is not now. I think not now is a sober statement to make because I don't think the material conditions are right for it. But I'm kind of asking, what's your timeline? Is it 50 years, 100 years, 500 years? Are there certain material conditions that you're waiting to manifest before you think it's a good idea to ban this ownership model? What are you waiting for?
So yeah, you previously agreed with me on gay space communism and the automation. You yourself agreed with me on that.
Well, I think it's inevitable at that point.
Right. So I think it's important to hold these kind of, idealistic utopian futures as a result. But what we have to do in the meantime is we have to eliminate the things that are prohibiting us from getting there. And one of the things that I'm trying to do here is press you on how I'm not like Stalin or Mao, because they certainly would have never implemented any type of worker cooperative policy. Again, they wanted that concentration into the state power, command economies. They wanted all that stuff. That's nothing that I want right now. I don't want just the workers to have a revolution and take over the government right this very second. That would be just kind of an invalid statement to make about the policy I'm proposing. Okay. So I feel like that's a lot where we differ, right? You're it's just essentially wrong. But there are things within capitalism and within this sort of excuse made for the status quo that I just have a fundamental disagreement about. And this is why I'm trying to move you. I'm trying to make you agree with me because you yourself did agree with me on so many policy prescriptions at the beginning. And I'm really just trying to get this one to you because I feel like gay space communism is inevitable. Of course it's going to happen if we have all this automation. There's not going to be a need for people to work. That's a fundamental truth about how automation and progression is going to run in society. So what we have to do is we have to prepare the working world for these kind of things. We have to bolster the idea of ownership to the working class in the economy. And the way I've been going about doing this is not through using force. I'm not trying to shove a gun at anyone and say, start a cooperative now, or else you're going to be, we're going to give you the gulags. No one said that, right? That would just be objectively not true. I've never advocated that. But what I have advocated is for ways to sort of lift the barriers and open up the floodgates for these types of business models to be run, right? So what I want to do is
so let's
subsidies, tax cuts. These are the types of things that will help.
So let's bear down on that because basically what I would say is so for instance, worker cooperatives, this, that, the other, statistically they're that much better, higher satisfaction, higher this, that, the other, right? Okay, cool. I would say.
Wait, before we go any further, are you gonna you just fundamentally agree with me on that? I don't have.
Yeah, you don't have to fight it. It's fine.
But
I also don't think that a worker. Yeah, but I also don't think that a worker cooperative model is going to work in every single style of business. But I think for the styles of business that it probably does work, it probably does have a lot of benefits for the workers. Okay, I think in particular. One of the ones that has been often touted is agriculture. I think that's one of the ones that everybody brings up, not necessarily for the farm hands themselves, but when it comes to negotiating complex wages, complex work, market prices, all that kind of stuff. I think a lot of agriculture is where a lot of cooperatives are concentrated. But anyways, it doesn't matter. So let's just say that we can see that worker cooperatives on the whole are better for the workers than most people. Then my thing is, I would say that I agree that some people don't pay their fair share or whatever. But what I would be saying is I would want to have a 10% or a 20% effective tax rate, because right now the way that it works is we have a very high tax rate for rich people where it's 35%, 37%, 40%, depending on what state and country they live in. What state in the country they live in. We have pretty high taxes. But then what we do is we name a bunch of economically productive behaviors that they are then allowed to deduct from their taxes, meaning that ultimately mega corporations like General Electric can have like a 0% or 7% tax burden, either because they had a loss or because, which losses is fine, but they did a bunch of R&D or they bought like a fucking jet for the executives or some shit like that. I would like to close those loopholes. I would think that if you're a multi-billion dollar fucking company and you got like billions of dollars of fucking profits in your fucking pocket, you should pay at least minimum like a 10 to 15% effective tax rate, meaning that for every dollar that you make, you are paying 15 cents into the general pot of social well-being. I think that's fine. But what I would say is that if you were to say, oh, Connor, I'm not trying to stick a gun in anybody's face, but worker cooperatives have a 0% tax burden and basically like profit driven, they have a 50% fucking tax burden. I would see that as de facto sticking a gun in somebody's face, because basically when you use the power of the state, you're fucking using the power of fucking weapons in order to fucking force people to do what they want to do. So really those numbers ultimately matter.
Further with that,
Sure.
Before you go any further with that, you do understand how ridiculous it is to say that giving someone less taxes or a lower tax rate is effectively doing the stick the gun in the mouth thing. I feel like
it depends on, it depends on it depends on the difference. If one of them is 40, if one of them, hold on, if one of them is 40%,
yeah, I was gonna defer to you.
Yeah, if one of them is 40% and one of them is fucking 0%, then obviously everybody is going to do the 0% model, because they're not going to want to deal with the fucking profit model where they have to give away 40 cents on the fucking dollar, and you're basically making it unviable as a concept. So that's where you're basically damaging a bunch of fucking economic activity, and you're disincentivizing a shitload of fucking people from participating in that economic activity and acting like you're not doing anything to fuck them over. So
I mean, another thing I'd like to address, though, is you understand we're already using the state power to collect income taxes. It's very important to address that. We're already using levels of state power. Only by redirecting this power, getting a more ethical approach to things in, and then, like, again, you already conceded the point to me that worker cooperatives are effective, and I'm not pushing for the 100%, economy of a worker cooperative. Wait, but can I just finish really quick?
Sure.
Yeah. So I'm not pushing for 100% of a worker cooperative economy. I've never tried to advocate that. There's obviously going to be some sectors where capitalism is going to need to exist in its current state in order for things to function, because there are some sectors where socialist styles of organization aren't going to work out of the jump, right? But there are, like you addressed, agriculture. There's a lot of benefit to having, again, credit unions, which is a consumer cooperative, which is even just, I'm fine with moving in that general direction to get what I want done. I believe in pragmatics, and you agreed with me on, again, the efficacy of worker cooperatives. If that never came into check here, then I just need you to, I want you to understand my problem is I understand you're skeptical of socialism. I really do. A lot of people are. But my problem is I would like you to, I'm trying to push for you at this point, not to pill you on cooperatives, not to do that, but to essentially get you to change rhetoric from complete skepticism and maybe be more on board with me as much as you can for the policy prescriptions that I make. When the time comes that we have a disagreement again, then we can argue about it then. But right now, what we need to do is shift out of the current dynamic of the economy and the way it exists today, because that's not very good. It's not helping people. That's just the truth. The economy does not work for the people.
Okay, but I would like to interject here though. The thing about it is, like, most socialists, as a centrist socialist or whatever, you typically admit like what capitalism does well and the successes of capitalism. What capitalism doesn't do well is basically handle things that are like basic human needs and inelastic demand items. Like healthcare is something that's like inelastic demand, right? It's something that people need, but they will pay any dollar amount for. As a result, they're basically being vultured by the system. Yeah, they're being vultured into the system. That being said, I am in a room covered in plastic and metal and copper that was basically done by neo-colonial imperial capitalism. You likewise are in a room that's covered in plastic and wood that was created by neo-imperial colonial capitalism. So as a result, you can say like, oh, well, we're killing the shit out of people, or there's a failed distribution, or this, that, the other. But to quote Antifa leader Joseph R. Biden, don't compare me to the almighty, compare me to the alternative. So if you're talking about basically like moving incrementally to the agenda. I feel like we're seesawing here conversationally, where I can move like 10% or 20% towards your agenda and you're like, hey, yeah, that's cool. But I want you to rhetorically come onto my side. That way you're advocating and you're acting as a slippery slope for the remaining 80%. And I'm not signing up for that shit. Number one, I'm not signing up for it because I don't necessarily think that it works. Number two, I don't think there's a lot of historical examples that work. Number three, then at that point, I'm just a fucking leftist. If I was advocating for fucking socialism, rhetorically, I just become a leftist. I know I am no longer right wing. And on top of that, I don't fucking believe that shit. A lot of the problems that you're bringing up that are like, that you see as like withering critiques of capitalism, I think have to be compared to their current modern alternatives that have a track record of success, or they have to be compared to history. Compared to history, capitalism fucking kicks ass compared to like feudal monarchy or whatever. And compared to people that you disavow as socialists or communists, it fucking kicks ass. So I don't mind moving with you towards the 40-hour work week, decent fucking pay, weekends off, fucking workers can pay their bills and take vacations and shit. I'm perfectly fine with all that shit. But then when it comes to, you kind of didn't admit this, but this is the thing that I would draw issue with. If the government was saying effective tax rate for private capital ownership, regardless of whether or not it's a board, is 40%, and the effective tax rate for cooperatives is 2.5%, I would have major fucking issue with that, because I would basically see that as putting the thumb on the scale in a way that's not organic and not driven by result. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I really want to say this. The thing I hammered home the most on was worker cooperatives here. And because essentially I got you to concede their efficacy to me, which I think was a huge part of this conversation and what I came in to do. I'm not trying to convince you to go full like command economy. I'm not even fulfilled on command economies yet. Like there's obviously my reluctancies there. What I have tried to pill you on is sort of these worker cooperative entities, which you conceded the point to. So I feel like we have a fundamental agreement, and I'm just trying to get you away from the advocacy for the status quo. You're right. Capitalism did build this house. It absolutely did. The bricks, the walls, everything around me was built by capitalism. But we're seeing problems in capitalism. We need to get away from the problems we see today. And I think this debate turned into me kind of attacking your rhetoric because you agreed with me. And it's not more extreme than that. You agreed with me on immediate pragmatic policy change. We're not shooting for the stars. We have to get over the mountain first.
Well,
that's what we have to do. So
I
think it's safe we can end the debate
quick.
right here.
Yeah, real
right.
quick. I was gonna say I'm gonna let Connor respond to that if he wants to, and then I would like to move into closing statements because it seems like this conversation has kind of met its natural end already.
Yeah. So my only final counterpoint, bazinga, is basically that like, okay, so I'm sure worker cooperatives do a lot for their employees, but as you admitted, we don't know that these are going to work in all sectors of the economy or that they're going to be the best model for it, particularly in our current material conditions. So that's where if I'm giving the concession that cooperatives in general are cool because workers have more of a say in their business, they can do revenue sharing, they can do profit sharing, they can do all sorts of things that benefit their lives. And as long as they don't tank the business because they're being selfish assholes, then in general, it's a good idea. Then the only thing that I would want as a concession is just the fact that we don't know that a cooperative model is going to work in all circumstances in all facets of the economy, which I feel is like a pretty fair compromise.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna move to I'll give Dylan the first closing statement, and then I'll let Connor do it, and then I'll let you guys shout each other out, and I'll give a little speech at the end.
Yeah, so I guess what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to, quickly respond to that, move and do kind of a closing statement and tie it all together. So basically, what I'm trying to say here is, not once did I really say that worker cooperatives would work in every sector of the economy. What I'm actually just pushing for here is right now the pragmatic ends of moving towards this, and trying to get you to agree with me and come over for the push for this policy, because like I said, you did concede it, and I'm very happy that you did, because you're a reasonable, rational dude. I understand that. I understood that going into this. This is why I wanted to have this debate with you, because I know you're a smart guy. I really do. And I want you to agree with me on this so much. So much. So essentially, I came out here. I sort of pushed what I wanted, explain how it's effective. I can provide data to back all of this up, all this information on cooperatives up. Socialism seems to be, in general, like leftism seems to be a way we're trending towards. And the more and more policies we implement with this kind of agenda in mind is going to help. We're going to get away from the status quo, which I'm trying to get Connor to really stop like playing defense for. I understand his skepticisms though, but I really would like it if he would engage in more rhetoric, which is what the last half of this debate was about. Really, it really was about how I wanted to like say, please take your skepticisms, throw them away with at least incremental advantages to worker cooperatives, and then move along from there. And I'm not going to push worker cooperatives to make up 100% of the economy. That's just not pragmatic. That's just not effective. What I would like to see is a rapid increase in them, though, because I think we can offer subsidies to these things, help them move along. And generally speaking, that's all I wanted to get across this whole debate. I felt it was a very good conversation. Very smart guy. I'm happy to have talked with Connor. Again, great debate. Was happy to be here. And thanks for moderating, Rinjald. Again, not that you really had to butt in too much, but, you know, happy to see your smiling face on camera every day. So with that, I guess I'll just pass it over for Connor if he wants to do his closing statement. Thanks.
Go ahead, Connor.
Yeah, my name is Connor. So I identify as center right, which I understand might be confusing for some people. But basically what I would say is I think that there's some social support that's just needed. If we want strong American families, if we want people to succeed and all that kind of stuff, there's no reason not to give them a good education. And there's also no reason not to make sure that they can't. So inelastic demand is an economic concept that basically says that you will pay what the producer charges because that product is so important to you. A off-cited example is cell phones, but an even better example is healthcare. What is your life worth to you? And the answer for most people is they will pay obscene amounts of money in order to save their own life or to save the life of somebody they care about. And as a result, the capitalist economy, basically takes advantage of that instinct. And as a result, basically we're being fleeced. We're being fleeced on all ends, which is why I advocate for these social institutions. Barring that, though, I really want the market to take over. I think the market is really good at a lot of things. I think the market is really good at creating luxury goods. I think it's really good at making most goods cheap. So that's why I'm a simp for the status quo, as we've been talking about. And as a result, that's why I can come 10 to 20% towards the left-wing agenda, because actually that's where I think the balance is. But that's where I can't sign off on the other things. And it's not because if Dylan was Tito for the next like 50 fucking years and he was in charge of the fucking mixed economy, market economy, moving towards socialism or whatever, then awesome. Fucking Dylan can be our fucking new Tito. Great. But
loving it. Yeah,
but that being said, it took Tito, who I still contend was relatively a benevolent dictator, to basically hold Yugoslavia together, to develop it into a functioning country. And just because there was one good person who knew how to administrate bureaucracy properly doesn't mean that when that person is gone, things are going to continue to work swimmingly. I think we can point to the Yugoslavia after Tito's death as an exact example of why feudalism, or this was more feudalist or monarchic than it was socialist. But that being said, it was a high IQ fucking conversation, which I do appreciate. It's fun to fucking yell. I love yelling. But it's also fun to just basically contend ideas with somebody who's smart, who knows what they're talking about, who has based their opinions in a lot of perspectives, and has basically taken the time to research what they think and then advocate for it passionately. So that's cool, and I'm super happy I was here to participate in that. So thank you guys for having me.
Thank you for being here. Everybody give it up for Mr. Status Quo.
Rude. Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead if you want to say anything.
Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to interject that I felt like there was just like an actual factual inaccuracy with the last closing statement about Yugoslavia.
Okay, shut the fuck up. Don't
No,
care.
no. I love my Yugoslavia. I love my Yugoslavia, Rinyal. You just have to let me get this
Yeah,
out.
that sucks, doesn't it?
I hate you.
Okay, thank you guys for being here. I'm not gonna let you argue past closing statements. Sorry, Dylan. I appreciate you being here.
Next time,
if anyone
next
is interested in participating, I think we're gonna set up a voting system pretty soon. Join Alexa's political shit show Discord server. We're gonna plan on hosting more debates. I might not be moderating the next few. I don't know if anyone noticed, but my internet was taking a shit throughout a majority of this debate. I luckily you guys were nice enough to not yell over each other, so I didn't need to do much. But yeah, if you want to see more of that, then come over to Alexa's server. I'm sure you can find a link from someone. Thank you guys for being here again, and thank you for letting me do this. Nice to meet you both.
All right, appreciate
Thanks
y'all
for being here. Thanks for being here, Rinyal. Thanks for being here, Connor. It was a pleasure.
Yep, catch you guys, and we can do this again soon. I'm gonna go talk to my chat, but y'all have an excellent evening. Bye.
Yeah, you have a wonderful night. Take care.
All right, guys, let's do it. I wouldn't have mind hanging out with them, but basically, since it's the holidays, I do need to get off of here pretty soon. So I'm gonna come to chat. You know, it was kind of more of a chill debate, so I'm not expecting 200 people to be fucking hanging out with us, especially on a Friday night with fucking hippy dippy going on. But I hope that for the people who did hang out with us, I hope that you have less of a headache than you would if you were watching the fucking hippy dippy, because I'm sure the hippy dippy is very contentious right now. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into my chats, and I will change my OBS to full camera, and then we'll just lose that game. Give me 1 second. Properties, deactivate, activate. Then you should be able to see my beautiful face very shortly. Let's do it. I didn't even notice that Rob Lowe was in my fucking background shot the entire goddamn time. My fucking wife bought a full picture cutout. Well, she didn't buy it. She got it from a Buy Nothing group, but she got a full Rob Lowe cutout, and I didn't even realize that he was with us the entire fucking debate. That's awesome. So everybody say hi to Rob Lowe. And then let's check in on YouTube chat and Twitch chat. And thank you. I see 31, 35 people hanging out in YouTube chat. That's awesome. Considering we got hippy dippy going simultaneously, considering we got other people streaming simultaneously, including your favorite debate lords. I appreciate y'all being here. So for those of you who are new here, you can do @Counterpoints in the chat. Okay, I will answer all of your questions. Just to kind of give you the lowdown, patreon.com/counterpoints is how you can support the channel. Number 1. Number 2, you can become a YouTube member. Number 3, you can do super chats on YouTube. Number 4, you can do Twitch subs or gift bits the same way that you can do with any other streamer. We haven't really grown that much on Twitch, but I think I need to change my channel settings so we're not in just chatting, we're actually in politics. But we'll dial it in. We're just trying to survive the holidays right now. So I'm gonna check in on YouTube chat, which I think peaked at 30, 35, which is pretty cool. And then thank you to the 9 to 10 people who were in Twitch chat for hanging out with us when you have such big creators out there. Destiny's live, Dylan Burns is live, so having 40 to 50 people hanging out with us when there's bigger creators out there, it does mean a lot. It does mean a lot. So thank you for hanging out with us. And I'll try to be quick so y'all can get over to your respective beautiful streamers. Syntha, sorry, Counterpoints, but if we practice Stoicism, we'll all start to rebuild Marcus Aurelius' slave empires. Yeah, exactly. Just because I think Marcus Aurelius is base doesn't mean I want to, genetically clone him and reinstitute him as the world leader. Synth, the only difference Counterpoints and a leftist is rhetoric. Lol. No, Synth, I will fucking fight you. This is fucking bullshit, and no, because if I'm not an advocate for decommodification of basic human needs or workers owning the means of production, then I'm not a fucking socialist. And if I don't think that a moneyless, stateless, classless society is possible, then fuck that. What? Because I want universal healthcare? Because I want fucking families to do well? I'm a fucking leftist? Eat a dick. And on top of that, that might be a little rude, but This is the thing that you have to fight for on the right. The right should not be automatically the party of like 19th century anarchic capitalist fucking the legislation. Their economics should not be don't tax the rich and the economy will be fine. That's fucking stupid. And so for every leftist asshole who wants to claim me as a fucking left winger, I have to fight 10 right wing assholes who think that if somebody's making a living wage, then it's a fucking socialist country. It's fucking insane. It needs to stop. And you're contributing, like, Seth, I know you're probably just memeing, but you're contributing to the fucking toxicness of our fucking economic discourse. Old school at Counterpoints, any comment on what our Demon Mama wants to do to RGR? Old school, tell me what Demon Mama wants to do to RGR, because I was actually thinking about doing some post-recorded content for that. At Counterpoints, just regular OBS, no Streamlabs OBS. Interesting. Yeah, Travis, aka Taze, helped me set it up. We still have to dial it in, basically. Logwood Potion Castle, no hippy dippy without at Counterpoints. Based. Thank you, buddy. Appreciate you being here. Sean D at Counterpoints, can you comment on why socialism tends towards dictatorship? It's because of the concentration of power. If you have a government that's capable of basically dictating how people conduct their economic lives on a day-to-day basis, then it's powerful enough to consolidate power and turn into an oligarchy. That's why. And then also, since you've banned capital as a competitor with the state, then at that point you have no competitors against the state. That's why it tends toward oligarchy. BPF, what's up, buddy? How you doing? Christian Valeris at Counterpoints, how many leftists do you think are mandatory worker co-ops versus better loan policy? That guy. And I'm memeing a little bit, but for basically that, that was the most like incremental socialist I've ever met in my entire life. So yeah. Old school, Demon Mom wants to go after her law career. Yeah, fuck that. And like we've held fire on Demon Mama for a long time, and we probably will continue to continue. But I am gonna call out how lefties cannibalizing RGR is fucking insane. So let's go into Twitch chat. Just check on them real quick. Vietnam is greater than China. Cool, I guess. Okay. Rinyald says, hey, yo, thanks for coming. Appreciate it. Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure. All right, so YouTube chat is popping. Fucking Twitch chat is not. So let's do it. Let's check in here. Longwood Potion Castle says, we need an OBS audit of where the tax dollars are going at Counterpoint. Yeah, maybe, but you're never going to fucking get it. So you might as well actually put money where it's needed and then let the fucking warmongers figure out the rest of the budget. Truth Lie at Counterpoints, as a former commie tanky, did the commie socialists explain how money resources would be obtained? Nah, we didn't really get into that. We kind of got into a rhetorical circle, but it is what it is. Lighter Bandit at Counterpoints, you're like if Al Bundy was a cop. Thanks for the takes. I think you'd be bigger if you were a raging lunatic like the rest of the right media figures. Hold the line. Yeah, I'll try, buddy. Thank you. Appreciate it. Shadows Lightly at Counterpoints, I'd be willing to help with Streamlabs over DC or VC if you want, but I was mainly just bullying you. Kid did pretty good. You were very good face. Yeah, thanks, buddy. Yeah, I appreciate him. So even if we disagreed on a bunch of shit, then we'll do it. So we have options here, okay? Twitch chat is not really popping. YouTube chat is popping. So what I could do is I could take 2 to 3 minutes in order to highlight the RGR versus Doe versus Vosh versus Destiny drama from my perspective, and then try to extract any kind of positive meaning from it. Or I could just do that post-recorded on my own shit. So if y'all wanted me to write that out real quick for like a minute or two and then do it as if it was a post-recorded episode, I can do that live. So that's up to y'all. So Old School at Counterpoints only asks, since I'm thinking of starting my own channel, but people like DM and Vivian terrify me. Yeah, don't let them terrify you. Fuck them. They just don't post your professional shit out there and don't argue with a child sex abuse survivor about their abuse. Alexandria Sofiakis at Counterpoints, ever thought of playing campaign during a debate instead of multiplayer? Yeah, absolutely. We probably will eventually. Longwood Potion Castle at Counterpoints, when is next Warhammer 40k vid? Games Workshop has fucked me super hard. So they basically they've held up all of my Angels of Death episodes, and I appealed them, and it still didn't matter. So since I have the 4-day weekend, I'll probably do it I'll probably do it this weekend. I'll get some hells reach out to you. So yeah. So I'm sorry. I wish I could be getting the Angels of Death, but they keep copyright striking it, and they're being rude. So at Counterpoints, certainly agree with your take on how socialists want mandatory co-ops, not necessarily on incentivizing through loans, but the idea of forcing co-ops in the economy is dangerous. Yeah, they seem to completely miss that point. Live, we're doing it live. No more RGO or toe drama. It's obnoxious. Okay, well, we can do it. Will streaming painting models get you copyright? No. It's only their copyrighted media work. Me painting wouldn't be a problem. So, all right, Twitch chat. So, anyways, ouch. I've heard they're hardcore about content. Yeah, they're fucking assholes about it. But hey, I actually kind of need to wrap up because of the holiday or whatever. Since there doesn't seem, I don't want to ruin Alexandria's fucking night. So I'll just shoot that like post-recorded, and then they or she can choose to watch it or not watch it. And then same thing with everybody else, because I don't want to ruin everybody's night. Just curious, did you watch the Charlie Brown Thanksgiving with the family? No, I didn't. A Longwood Potion Castle painting string. What, you want to bore everybody else to death except for you? Maybe in the future we'll get a painting camera. So yeah, all right. How do I raid? Can I raid? I don't know how to raid. Man, if the 11 people in Twitch chat, you can ask questions, but if you can hang out in my chat so I could raid like Hippy Dippy or something, I think that'd be super fun. I would love to do a raid. I've never done it before. Emotes only, subscribes only, pop out, pause, deleted messages, chat appearance, show, mod icons. I don't know how to do it. How do I do it? Video producer, channel creator, desktop settings, my channel. Yeah, how do I do a raid? Somebody tell me. Longwood Potion Castle. You're watching on both. That's fucking based. Channel points. How the fuck do I raid? I think if you type /raid. Okay, then the channel name. Okay, cool. Give me a second. What is Dylan Burns' shit? Raid Dylan Burns TV. Is there an underscore or something? What is it? I would actually appreciate, like, I know I'm fucking boomering this shit, but I would love it if y'all hung out in my chat so I could just fucking raid Dylan Burns. I think that'd be super fun, just for shits and gigs. Dylan Burns TV. Yeah, okay. /raid. Unrecognized command /raid. What's his fucking channel name? It's Dylan Burns TV. Dylan Burns TV. All right, well, it's an unrecognized command, so you guys can go fuck yourselves. Why can't you sub? I think you can sub. You should be able to sub. Maybe you can only gift subs. I don't fucking know. We'll talk to Travis. I appreciate y'all. Anyways, get the fuck out of here. Go watch your other favorite creators. I appreciate you guys. Have a great night. Bye.